where you're from. All right. Once again, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you're joining from. Thank you guys for being here. My name is April Mijo, and I serve as the Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement here at Emory University. Before we get started with today's program, we have a few housekeeping announcements. So please note that the views and opinions expressed in the learning development webinars are those of the individual speakers and do not necessarily reflect the official policy, position, or views of Emory University, the Emory Alumni Association, or its affiliates. The content provided in this program is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as an endorsement by Emory University or the Emory Alumni Association. This session is being recorded, so please be sure to keep your microphones muted to avoid disruptions, though we encourage you to keep your cameras on. If you have any questions throughout the session, please use the raise your hand feature, and April will get to those questions as they come in. And we will also be pausing, if you want to put questions in the chat, she'll be pausing regularly to check on that. And of course, you'll have a chance to ask questions at the end. And now I'm so excited to introduce our featured coach, April Walker Picaro. April is a Texas native. Prior to starting her writing coaching company, A Little More Truth, she worked at AT&T for 7 years as an area manager and senior project manager. April is also currently an adjunct professor at Oklahoma City Community College, where she's taught a myriad of classes in the humanities since 2016. In addition to receiving her Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing from Hollins University, April is also a certified project management professional, PMP. She drives the greatest joy from exposing people to the power of storytelling and igniting the imagination. So please help me welcome April.
All right, thank you so much, Aram. I am looking forward to talking to you all this morning, this afternoon, depending on where you're from. And I just want to make sure, can everyone hear me okay? Thumbs up, everyone hear me okay? All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and start sharing the presentation and we're going to get into it. So give me a moment and let me know. You should be able to see my screen now. We're good? All right, perfect. Alrighty, so today we're going to talk about what's your story, crafting a purpose-centered resume. And I'm just really looking forward to this because I love working with people on resumes. A lot of times people get nervous about resumes, but I love taking a different approach to resumes. So what's ahead, just a little bit of a roadmap for you. I'm going to welcome you, let you know a little bit about me. I'm going to tell you a little story that I like to call the legend of the literary architect. We're going to do a little activity called Would You Rather? And then I'm going to jump into what we do at A Little More Truth and give you some tips for working on your resume yourselves. And then we're going to play a little game called Resume Operation, and that'll lead us into our breakout session. And then we will open up for some questions. And until next time, we will leave you there. So again, my name is April, and I am a wife and mama to a beautiful 8-month-old little boy who keeps me on my toes. I'm a poet and a lover of language. I got my BA from Emory in 2011 in English and Creative Writing, and my MFA in Creative Writing from Hollins University in 2013. Like Aaron said, I'm a PMP certified project manager, and I've been the president of A Little More Truth since 2020. I also worked at AT&T for 7 years, and before I went on maternity leave in November of last year, I was a professor at Oklahoma City Community College for 7 years. So that's just a little bit about me. And like was mentioned, I'm going to stop and pause for questions and things like that. I am a teacher by nature, so I just love for people to jump in with their questions. So I'll be, kind of monitoring the chat, looking for hands and things like that with Aaron's help. But if you have a question that's just burning, bust out with it, because I love questions. I love to engage with people. All right, so here's a little story. The legend of the literary architect. When I was an area manager at AT&T, one of my roles was to be on the interviewing and hiring committee for new project managers that were coming in. And so we would get resumes from HR that had been screened and everything, and they were coming to us to look at for going into an interview with the person. So there was this one individual whose resume.
April, I'm so
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt. I got a message that some people cannot see your screen. Can you guys give me a
Yeah.
thumbs up if you can, in the chat? Let me know. Um,
I'm seeing some thumbs up.
okay,
Seeing
perfect.
more thumbs
So
up.
if you cannot see her screen, you might want to try like maybe leave and come back. It might be a connection issue. I'm not sure because I see it on my end and most people see it. So again, sorry for the interruption. Go ahead.
No problem. Like I said, I'm used to the interruptions as a teacher, so not a problem. Want to make sure everybody is feeling engaged. So like I was saying, I was part of the interviewing team, and we would get the resumes from HR, and I would always review them before I would go into an interview. And so this one particular resume caught my eye because the individual put on the resume that they were a literary architect. And I was just like, what in the world is a literary architect? Like, my background's in English. I love words. I have my MFA, but I've never heard of a literary architect. And how can I get into this role? Because it's fascinating. What is it? And so we go into the interview, and it's a group of three of us interviewing them. And I, go through the standard questions of what are you interested in this role for, blah, 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 blah. But I get to the point where we can just ask questions of the person. And I would say, I saw on your resume that you were a literary architect. Can you tell me more about this? And there was just a blank look on their face. He was like, come again? And I said, right here, it says you're a literary architect. What does that mean? What did you do? And it turns out that this person actually had no clue what a literary architect was, because the night before their interview, they had their wife do their resume for them. And so they didn't even know that that was on their resume. And they were just completely embarrassed, completely speechless, didn't know what to say about this role that they had on their resume with descriptions of what the literary architect did. But it wasn't a real thing. It wasn't, at least it wasn't something that they were actually familiar with, and that wasn't a job that they had done. And so, I didn't make them feel bad about it because they already clearly felt bad about it. I just, said, okay, well, let's move on to the next question and things like that. But I tell you that story to say, especially in the age of AI and all the different tools that are out there, make sure that you know your resume, that you know your story, and that you can speak to every part of your resume, because you never know who may get it in their hands and see a part of it that they're interested in. And if it's not something true, that's already putting you at a disadvantage with getting the job that you're hoping to get. So make sure that you know your resume and know your story. Another little just tidbit there is that there are systems, especially one called applicant tracking system, which is a software that screens resumes for different things before it even gets to a person in HR or gets to a person who's doing the interview process. And so there's little things like you can't have certain lines on your resume, and you can't have a picture on your resume. And if your resume is not formatted the right way, this software looks for all these things and will kick your resume out of the screening pool before it even gets to a human. So you want to make sure that your resume is really clean and really kind of streamlined, and it's not already putting you at a disadvantage before you get to a person. And then just one more little tidbit: when I was an intern in college, at AT&T, actually, one of my roles was to screen resumes that had made it through the systems and the tools and software, and it made it through HR. And I was to screen the resumes and pass it on to my boss to say, hey, this resume is someone you should look at. And I was a college kid, it was the summer, and I would look at resumes and just say, oh, this one's interesting, this one's not interesting. And it was completely, subjective. It was up to my opinion of whether or not I thought this person's resume should go through or not. So there's a lot of factors that go into whether your resume makes it to the person who can hire you. So don't be discouraged. Just know your story, be confident in your story, and be confident in your resume. So any questions before I move on? Okay. So we're going to do this little activity of would you rather. Would you rather buy this? And hopefully you can see my screen. Would you rather buy thiamine, mononitrate, riboflavin, folic acid. Would you rather buy this? So give it a second. Or this? Clearly, we see that this is an Oreo being dunked into some good, delicious, I'm imagining cold milk. So again, would you rather buy this, unbleached, enriched flour, or this? And you can come off mute and tell me which one you would rather buy. Or you can put it in the chat. Want to just take that Oreo and dunk it in, twist it apart, get into that Oreo? Or do you want to have some high fructose corn syrup? I'm seeing some things in the chat. Neither. Yeah, it is the same thing, Hillary. Oreo, thanks, Mary Claire. Oreo. Yeah, Oreo. So, I mean, this is a pretty obvious answer of which one you would rather buy. You don't want to buy the soy lectin chocolate artificial flavor. If you do want to buy any of it, you probably want to buy the Oreo. And I like to tell people this is what we do. We take your resume from this, a list of ingredients, or in the case of a resume, from a list of job roles and responsibilities, to a advertisement for you, a marketing pitch for you, a story for you. So again, what we do from a list of duties, this is what we have, some sample resumes that I've done, to a story of impact. And we're going to spend some time here on the list of duties, and I'm going to make my screen bigger so hopefully you can see it. So we're going to start at this first resume, and this was for an individual who had about under 10 years of work experience. And as you can see, we're just looking at the work experience section, but it looks like they have a lot of experience in each of the positions that they're in. And it looks like, okay, this is somebody who should definitely get an interview because of all the things they've done. So let's just look specifically at like this second bullet under this first job. It says prospected and quickly built rapport with potential customers to overcome objections and regularly achieve monthly sales targets, resulting in 250,000 in revenue. There's nothing wrong inherently with that bullet, but it is a little bit long. It's a little bit verbose, and it says a lot, but it doesn't really show a lot of what this person did in that position. Another bullet that we can look at that was quite long was down here, this last bullet under black box. And it says conceptualize and fostered a strong, healthy, and inclusive team culture for the high level, from the high level, advising leadership on benefit structures, team building activities, and core value adoption to how we work and come together on a day-to-day basis, organizing and covering team meetings, taking thorough notes, and holding attendees accountable for action items discussed. That one is more of a mouthful. And honestly, when somebody is looking at your resume, they spend about 25 seconds looking at your resume. So even if they get down here, they're not going to read this whole bullet point. So what we did instead is change it to make it a more streamlined resume. So it's still the information, the story that they were trying to convey, but it's in a more streamlined way. So for example, the bullet that we read first, improved customer rapport resulting in revenue increase of $250,000. All we need to know here is that you were able to bring in more revenue because you built that relationship with customers. We didn't need to know everything that was said in the previous bullet point on the previous slide. Another one that we read down here under black box. So created growth opportunities for entrepreneurial leaders through organization of Black Box Connect, an immersive collaborative innovation experience. So again, we're telling the story, but in a more concise, more streamlined way. And instead of telling so much, we're showing what this person did. We're showing the impact that they had in each one of these roles. And we're trying to be consistent with the story that we're telling. So if you can see up here, one thing that we do is we pull out kind of what the story is that you're trying to tell and put it in words that describe who you are. So this person was a community builder, a project manager, and they were looking to get into data analytics. So we put that there, and that's kind of the framework for the story. Then we take that 2 to 3 words of who you are and who you're trying to be and put it into a 2-sentence no more than 2 sentence kind of introduction to who you are. So a cultivator of community, using privilege and the power of education to remedy inequities, experience in creating tools and plans for dismantling racism at the organizational level. And so this is like our introduction to you. And throughout the whole resume, we're going always back to that introduction of who you are. So fostering empathetic customer relationships and resulting in 1.4 million in annual incremental revenue. That shows that you're a community builder, you're creating tools, things like that. Developed innovative organizational strategies to combat racism. Again, that goes back to the tools that you're creating, and all of it is a story that is being strung together in a really narrative structure telling who you are. So I'm going to pause there for a minute to see if anybody has any questions. Any questions? Because I know it's a lot.
We have one in the chat that says, who is we? I'm assuming they're asking like about this particular resume. Hillary, feel free to come off mute.
Yeah.
And
no, you just said that you said we did this to the resume. Are you speaking of you and your team, your coaching team?
Yep.
Okay, that's all.
Yeah. Good question. Any other questions?
Hello, I'm just gonna go off mute if that's fine. My name is Mark. I was gonna write it in the chat, but I was going to ask, like, what is the balance between being succinct and to the point and kind of being afraid that you're not like leaving in enough details? So I think for me that's always like a trade-off of like, oh, I'm trying to explain and like get them to understand like what exactly this is. But I guess like to your previous example, it can sometimes be too verbose and I have too much information.
Yeah, that's a great question. And a lot of people have that question when it comes to their resume. Because again, this is your one chance to tell who you are and you want to tell everything. And so what I like to tell people is that you want to say just enough to hook people into who you are so that they understand very quickly, this is who you are, this is the impact that you've had. And then when you get into the interview, you have brought questions, or you have brought up questions in their mind where they're like, okay, yeah, this person said this and I want to know more about this. So in my example from the literary architect, that was something that was very succinct, very clear, and it made me want to know more about that person. It just turned out not to be something that was true. And so a good standard that I give people is you don't want to have more than 2 lines, 2 sentences, 2 lines of text under each bullet. Because space is so precious and you really want your resume to be no more than a page. If you have over 20 years of work experience, you can go a little bit more than a page, but you really just don't want to do more than 1 to 2 lines, 1 to 2 sentences of text for each bullet. And you have to make sure that every word counts. And so what I like to do with people is we write it all down, we put it all out there, and then we start refining and editing the text to make sure that it's the best words and the best orders. And because I'm a poet, I'm really good at saying these are the best words and the best orders. So does that answer your question? If not, please tell me.
Oh, yes, thank you.
You're welcome. I see
then we
some
have a couple more questions that came in.
Yep. So the first one I see is
about listing the most important roles. Danielle, did April's explanation answer that one for you? And then the second question was, when should you use a CV versus a resume?
A resume. Yep. Okay. I see, Danielle. So listing the most important roles. Yeah. So you don't want to go back more, depending on how much work experience you have, you don't want to go back more than like 10 years of work experience. And within that 10 years, you want to say what your most important and most impactful roles were. So it may not be necessarily that it's the role that you're focusing on, but what impact did you have in that role? And if you're applying for a specific job and you know that these roles kind of line up more with that job, you want to highlight those roles and not putting all the details under each role. You want to make sure that you're putting the most important details that lead people to want to know more about you. Does that answer that question, Danielle?
She said yes. And then I guess somebody else kind of emphasized her other question of
when should you use a CV versus a resume? Yeah, so a CV versus a resume, it really depends on what the company is looking for. And a lot of times in the job description, they'll say resume in cover letter or CV in cover letter. I find that the CV is more important to use when you're applying for academic type of positions, and a resume is just a good standard for all jobs. If you're applying for some type of research position and you wanted to show the like accolades that you had and you wanted to talk about your experience a little bit more in different roles, a CV would be good. But I find that a resume is just a good kind of standard to have unless they're specifically asking for a CV. Usually it's a resume and a cover letter, and then a CV is optional. Does that answer that question? Yeah, I see some more questions in the chat. When is it time to take education off the resume, and does it matter which field you're in? So in research, Mary Catherine, I would say you want to keep your education on there, but you want to keep it very brief. So you just want to say what the degree is, what school it was. You don't necessarily have to put what year you graduated from the institution in, because that can date you and that could put people at a bias against you. So it's really just what was the school, what was the degree, and you don't have to put specifically what you studied unless it applies specifically to a role and you know that they're going to be looking for you studied this or you did this type of research and things like that. But education, I usually put it at the bottom of the resume instead of the top. Usually you in the old way, you would see it at the top of the resume and then you would go into the experience and things like that. But with this newer format, you do your kind of introduction to who you are, you do your work experience, you do your education at the bottom, and you take out the objective altogether, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Does that answer that question, Mary Catherine? For you, I would say keep your education on there, especially in research, because they're probably looking for that.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks so much.
You're welcome. Okay. Does the advice on 10 years change if you've been at the same company for more than 10 years? No. So the next resume that we'll look at, this individual had, like I said, 20 plus years of experience, and most of it was at the same company. So I'll show you how you kind of format that so that you can say, this was where I was and this is how it worked out. All right. Any other questions? CV is most up to date. Yeah, you're welcome. You're very welcome. All right. Good questions, really good questions. And I love answering questions and talking to people. So we're going to shift from this person's resume on the left to the person who had more work experience over here on the right. And you will see like how I put my comments and things like that. When I'm coaching someone, we do sessions in person or on Zoom like this. And then we do independent sessions where we talk back and forth through email and I give you feedback and things like that. So that's what the red comments are. So this individual, like I said, had 20 plus years of experience, and most of it was with AT&T. And so you'll see in this previous format of their resume, this is how they listed it out: AT&T Associate Director of the Year and Technical Director of the Year, and like that. So this is what they had going on. And I'm going to come back to it, but I'm just going to show you the formatting of it right quick so you can see. Whoops. So once we got into the correct formatting, you just put their experience, you put AT&T here, and then you just put however long you'd been there for until, if it's your current role, the present. So they've been there since 2012 until presently, and that's what we put. So you don't have to put each year for each role. You have the role here, role here, role here, role here, but it's all under AT&T. And they did have some other experience that we highlighted with another company, but most of it was with AT&T. So you only have to list that once. You don't have to put the city and the state and all that stuff. Just one time AT&T, one time the company, and then the years that you've been at the company. And you can see that they have their different roles at the company here. So let's go back to their previous one. So this person, unlike the previous resume, their voice was more concise than the other resume. So there's a lot less that they had. So like under this role, they just have program management of application development. And one comment that I made to them was, if you can give me a specific example of an application that you developed and the problem that it solved, then we may be able to keep this one. Because one thing I like to tell people, resumes are, they're kind of personal because it's your story and you want to tell everything, but everything doesn't have a place in the resume. And if we can't really back it up with more detail of why it's showing your impact in your story, then that bullet may have to go so that we can give space to a stronger bullet. So that was what I was telling them here. And then another one that they had was own systems and tools for enterprise mobility management service organization. That sounds like it says a lot, but my comment here was, what are you actually saying that you owned the systems? What does that mean? Did you design them? Did you manage or monitor them? In other words, why would a potential employer care that you own the systems? So again, this sounds like you're saying a lot, owning the systems and tools for this organization, but what does it mean? We don't want to just have the list of ingredients, the list of duties. We want to tell the story. So let's go and look at their specific resume changes. So that one was here, and we changed it completely to talk about more of what they did. So when I talked to them, when we worked in our coaching sessions, they actually explained to me what owning those systems meant. And then we put that into words to show the picture here. So directed successful migration of licensed CRM solution into 12 plus internal systems, eliminated cost of licensing the platform, resulting in 175,000 in annual savings. So again, that's telling me more than just you own the system. It's telling me what you did, how you did it, and what impact that it had for the company. Another one is up here, collaborated with ServiceNow's industry product team to develop and implement new telecom service management TSM application. And so one thing that a lot of people will do in industry specific roles is they like to use the acronyms, but not tell what the acronyms mean. And if you're going to apply to a job within the same company, you don't have to necessarily explain or spell out the acronym. But if you're applying to a job within the same field, but not within the same company, you want to spell it out so that people are not asking, what does that mean? They're clear on what it means, and then you can put the acronym in parentheses. So let's see another one that they had. Directed team responsible for building, delivering, and supporting solutions aligned with the needs of business counterparts. So that one, it's just enough to make somebody say, what does that mean? What did you do with your team? What did y'all build? It's making people want to ask you questions rather than just telling them something or telling them too much where they're not even reading it anymore or not telling them enough. It's giving them just enough to reel a person in who's interviewing you to say, what did this mean? Tell me more. Or this one, led new application development lifecycle supporting the organization. Again, it's telling just enough to reel somebody in to say, tell me more, and not telling too much and not telling too little. And again, like I said, this person had a very concise voice anyway, so we had to pull out more than we had to cut down, like in the other resume. And that's one thing that I also like to focus on when I'm working with someone on resumes is what's your voice? Because we're not just trying to create a resume that sounds like everybody else's resume. We want it to sound like who you are and tell, again, your story in your original and unique way. So any questions? Any questions?
I'll just unmute myself really quick if that's okay.
Yes.
I'm noticing that for the AT&T experience that there's just one set of dates, 2012 to present, and they didn't break it down by like how much time they spent in each role. Is that what you recommend doing?
Yes, that's what I recommend doing because one, it saves space, and two, it shows that you have been consistently in this role. So if you have, it doesn't matter if it's like 3 different positions over 5 years, it's in the same company, you want to put it in that block like that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. And then if there's things like gaps, like if you had a period of time where you were unemployed or a period of time where you took, say, like maternity leave, like I just recently did, you don't have to fill in the gaps necessarily. You just want to be able to speak to the gaps. Let's see, Danielle, you have a question? Schedule time to work with you on resume. Yes, I am. And I think Aram will tell you more about how to set up time with me at the end of the presentation, and I will too. But yes, I am. I am. They are open, and we can talk about.
I will actually
Yeah.
email you guys all of that information afterwards when I send you the recording. So you'll definitely get all of that information.
But yes, they are open, and I am looking forward to hopefully speaking with some of y'all.
This is Travis. I have a quick question for you.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, if you have a military career that you may not exactly, I don't know, I don't even know how to say it. My military, I was in the Navy and the Army,
Mhm.
and I'm a leader now. And I do think it's relevant because that's where I got a lot of my leadership qualities from.
Mhm.
But I've been told because of the time span now that it should be something that's not talked about. And I
Okay.
felt like that wasn't true because it's a staple of who I am and where I get a lot of my characteristics from. So I wasn't sure what your thoughts would be. My resume is actually 3 pages, and I'd love to share it and sort of, even if you want to pick it apart and just say, hey, this is why or why not.
Yeah.
Your thoughts.
So first off, you do want to tell if that's a big part of who you are and how you got to where you are right now, you do want to tell it. It's just a matter of how we tell it. So say for instance, there were a lot of kind of duties and roles that you did while you were in the military service that aren't necessarily um leadership type of impacting things. We could put it up here in like your skill set section that I call it, and that would talk to those things. And then we could talk about your military career and how it led to where you are now in the introduction to who you are. And then we would talk about, okay, this is your whole military career, right? Does it all need to go on the resume, or does just one facet of it need to go on the resume, and how does it lead into the whole story of who you are? But if you feel like it's a big part of who you are in your story, we would find a way to work it in. It just may not be in the traditional way of how it's, your experience and things like that, but we would find a way to work it in. Does that answer your question, Travis?
Yes. So I did leave it on and I just put it as a section, military career highlights, and
Mhm.
just highlight it when I was in the service. And hopefully, if they ask questions, I could, I'd just be able to talk to what I learned and why this was
Yeah.
relevant or important. So
Yeah.
I did limit the amount of information. I didn't go into detail of what I was responsible for because, again, I've got a pretty extensive background
Mhm.
in leadership. So,
So
um,
another way you could work it in is putting it into your cover letter, because your cover letter is where you can expand on the narrative more. So the resume is where you just want to put the highlights, and then the cover letter is where you just tell the story that's not in the resume. And that's a lot of times why they go hand in hand. So you could talk about the experience that you had in the military, how it led to where you are now in your leadership roles, and how it's going to help you lead to where you want to go. And then, depending on what jobs you're applying for, the military service may be something we highlight more. So, what I like to do is create a master resume for people. And then if you're looking for specific jobs, then we look at what that job is looking for in terms of skill set and things like that. And we tailor it to what that job is looking for. So depending on the job, the military experience may be more relevant than in other settings. And then again, you can expand upon it in the cover letter. With your resume being 3 pages long, we would really want to get it to a page. But again, if you have like 20 plus years of experience, it may have to go over to 2 pages. And we just want to make sure that every bullet is leading the person to the second page of your experience. Because, like I mentioned earlier, it's only about 25 seconds that somebody's going to spend glancing through your resume, and you want to make sure that you're putting the most impactful story up front. Does that help, Travis?
thank you. That's very helpful.
You're welcome. I think I saw another question in the chat. Is that true? Yep. Let's see. Really appreciate you.
It was just a comment.
Yeah, no, you're I'm glad you appreciate the succinctness of it. You, as somebody who loves language and loves words, one thing that even I got tired of when reading people's resumes was just seeing so many words on a page. Like your brain just kind of shuts down when you see so many words on the page. So again, this is all about formatting too. It's not just the words specifically, it's about how you formatted the spacing, the text, all the stuff like that. So good. If you have a role that was part-time, should you point that out? That just depends. So a lot of people who have less than 10 years of experience, especially if you're just coming out of college, you may have had those internships or those research positions or just a part-time job. And it depends on what you did in that part-time job. So if you were a secretary for a law firm and you are applying for a job in software development, you probably don't need the secretary at the law firm position unless while you were a secretary at the law firm, you also help them build a software to make inputting time quicker or something like that. So it really depends on what you're doing in that part-time job and what type of part-time job it is. If you're just putting it there to show that you don't have a gap in your work history, you don't necessarily need to put it in. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. I guess it was more that like so I have a gap in my resume because I got long COVID and I couldn't work for 2.5 years, and now I can only work part-time because I'm sort of disabled. So it's an important role that I did, but I wasn't sure if it was worth pointing out that it was part-time.
Yeah. No, if it's an important role, and I do understand about having the long COVID, I had it too, and it does impact it, and especially in this world, I would put it in there if it's an important role. It doesn't matter that it's part-time or not. If it's an important role, you want to put it in there. Because it also shows what you are looking for right now too. And so if someone has a question about it, they can talk to you about, okay, are you looking for full-time employment? Are you looking for part-time employment? What are your needs and things like that? It opens up the conversation. All right, another question. If you are thinking about a shift from your current role or industry, how do you handle that in your resume? That's a good question. So if you're wanting to shift careers completely and into a different industry, you want to look at what that industry is looking for. So you want to look at some job descriptions for, if you're not looking for a specific job right now, you want to look at job descriptions for that industry and see what are the kind of keywords, buzzwords that they are looking for in their employees. And you want to tailor your resume to talk to the experience that you have that leads to that. If you don't have that type of experience, that would go back to this resume where this person, they wanted to get into data analytics, but this is not the experience that they had per se all throughout their resume. So you want to say that this is what you're wanting to get into and still talk to what you're experienced in. And if you have any like classes that you've taken or LinkedIn courses that you've taken that you can talk about, that you gotten some experience, you can talk about it up here. But if you just don't have the experience that is the industry you're looking to get into, you can't put it in there. That goes back to the literary architect. You don't want to tell a story that's not true and authentic to who you are. You want to say what your impact is in your current role and hope that somebody sees that you're somebody who is willing to learn, somebody who can be trained, and somebody who wants to get into this. Also, that's another place where you can put in your cover letter, this is what my responsibilities have been, this is what my experience has been, this is what I'm looking to get into, and this is why. So again, the cover letter and resume can go hand in hand in that type of situation. Did that answer that question? I think that was from Miranda. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. But again, just please don't say that you did something that you didn't do, because it's just awkward for everybody if you do that. So please know your resume and let it be authentic to who you are. Any other questions? These are great questions. I see something in the chat. Thinking about a shift from your current. Nope.
Can your team help with federal resumes where LinkedIn details are required?
Yeah, so it's not a cookie cutter approach where you want it to be just a page. Sometimes it'll need to be more than a page. Sometimes you'll need the trifecta of the resume that's a little longer, the cover letter that goes into some more detail, and then your CV. So in a federal type of resume situation, yeah, it can't be a page when you gotta kind of get everything in there, especially if you have the experience. So yes, we can help with that, and we really focus on tailoring it to what your needs are. Good questions. All right, if there's not any other questions at the moment, we're going to move on to a little activity. But first, I'm going to give you some tips. So these are just a few tips to help you as you're looking at your resume yourself to get started. The first thing is you want to eliminate the objective. The objective is just kind of an antiquated piece of the resume, and it takes up space without really telling anything about who you are. So again, instead of the objective, you want to have a little bit of a narrative introduction of who you are, and then go into your skills and things like that. So no objective. And then you want to use the active voice in your experience section, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. And lastly, avoid phrases like I'm a hard worker, I'm passionate about, I'm excited. These are things that employers expect from potential candidates, so you don't have to waste space saying I'm a hard worker and I'm passionate about leading change in this organization. They're expecting that if they're looking at your resume at all. So let's talk about the active voice a little bit. Every word on your resume matters. That's why it's important to eliminate unnecessary verbs. Basically, the active voice uses verbs to convey authority. So here's a quick example. This is the active voice. Manages complex projects achieving 95% customer satisfaction. Versus, I have managed complex projects and have achieved 95% customer satisfaction. Here you see the verb manages and the verb achieving versus have managed and have achieved. This is just saying that you are an authority at what you're doing. It's quicker and to the point, it's more concise, and it saves some space so you can get into other bullet points. Does that make sense what the active voice is versus the passive voice? Any questions on that? So one question that you may have is, well, what if it's past experience? Do I still use the active voice? You do. You just want to put it in the past tense. So we'll go back and look at the resumes from before. So you see in this first one, it says develop, collaborate, consult. These are all active voice present tense. In previous positions, we have built, evaluated, directed, mentored. So still the active voice with these verbs, but in the past tense. That's the only difference. So if you have current experience that you're talking about, you want to be active voice present tense. If you have past experience that you're talking about, you want to be active voice past tense. Make sense? Just a little English language there. English lesson for you. Any questions? All right, so we have a little bit of time, I think, to do this. So we're going to go into an activity where you go into breakout sessions with each other, and hopefully this helps you put to practice what we've been talking about today. So we're going to do a resume operation, and this is a resume from a real client of mine who had 30 plus years of work experience, most of it at the same school and all of it in the same field. And this was what they came to me with. This was their resume and what they said. So they taught writing to all fourth graders. They were the LPAC chair, new teacher mentor, taught 106 students the writing process. So a very succinct resume, but a little too succinct. So what I want you to do in your breakout sessions, and we'll just take about 5 minutes in the breakout sessions, I want you to look at this resume, and I'll put it back on the screen, and think about these questions. So these are some guiding questions for you. What story is this resume trying to tell? What words would you use to describe this person's skill set? How would you describe the impact this person has made in their career? And why should anyone hire this person? You don't have to answer all these questions. Just think about these questions as you're looking at this resume. And if you think of anything else that you think could improve this resume, bring it back to the group and talk about it in your breakout sessions. So Aram, can you put them into?
Yes. How many people do you want in each group?
How many people do we have on right now?
I think we have about 20.
So let's say about like three people in each group.
Okay. All right. So we're gonna have 5 groups with 3 and 4. And did you want to be in one of the groups?
Yeah, I'll be in one.
Okay.
So again, this is the resume, and these are the questions. So before she puts you in this groups, you may want to just take a quick picture of the questions, because I'm going to put it back on the resume.
Okay. All right. I'm opening them up now.
All right.
Sorry, I can't hear you
I only got
clearly. It
questions.
sounds breaking up.
Can you hear me better? Hello?
Yes, I can hear you,
Okay.
but barely.
Um, okay. Well, my question is, in the breakout room, the resume didn't show up.
Yeah, so when you do, that's why she had said, if you guys want to take a quick picture, because when you do the breakout rooms, it doesn't show the, it won't show April's screen.
Oh, okay. I only heard taking picture of the questions because we thought that, okay. So do you have a copy of it so I can share it back into the group? Because no one
Let me
in my group has it.
see. Let's see. Yeah, because it's not giving me the option to show it to you guys while.
Sorry.
Oh, you're fine. Because I thought about that too. That how, like, if you guys are going to be able to see the resume or not.
Mhm.
So what I'm gonna do is, I will go, I'll actually put you guys, so there's 3 people in your room.
Correct.
Okay, I'm gonna move you to the room, that April's in. That way she can still hopefully at least tell you what's on there.
Okay. All right. Thank
All right. Mhm. I moved some people to another room because they didn't have copies of, they weren't able to take a picture of the resume. So if you cannot see the resume, let me know. Welcome back. Some people tend to go till the breakout, like the session kicks them out, so they have about 30 seconds. So. All right, looks like we have everyone back.
All right, we're back.
Yes, everyone's back.
Okay, perfect. And I'm gonna go back to sharing my presentation with you all. What I was saying to my group before we ended was the special interests that are shown on the resume. You don't really need to say that in your resume. If somebody's interested in what you do outside of work, your extracurriculars and things like that, you don't need to say like what you're a member of and things like that, unless it's specific to what the job you're applying for. So in the previous example, the resume for the person who had worked at AT&T for many years, they also were very involved in ServiceNow conferences, and they were applying for a job at ServiceNow. So you would want to put that you know, were a member of the ServiceNow organization in terms of the national organization to show that you're already kind of a part of this and interested in this. But in this resume, you don't need to put that, you know, you're interested in church and poetry and aerobic dancing. That's fine, but it's not something that you need to put on the resume. And hopefully if you get to talk in your interview, you can talk more about, you know, the teacher sorority that you're in and things like that. So just someone from one of the groups, tell me what are some things that you all noticed and how you operated on this resume. Someone willing to share? Anybody? Just one thing.
I'll go if you want. We said that it was kind of hard to know like we don't know what they're applying for. But it just doesn't say anything about them, and that it's like, well, they were a teacher and that was it, and there's no like impact behind what it's missing all of the impact and the kind of translatable skills and things like that.
Exactly. That's a good point. You just know that they're a teacher. You don't really know. I mean, clearly, you know, a teacher has some impact, but you don't know what this specific teacher's impact has been over a very lengthy career. Good point. Mary Catherine, you have something?
Yeah, we also talked about how the different titles, fourth grade writing teacher, fourth grade reading/writing teacher, fourth grade writing teacher, sort of say the same thing over and over again. And we thought there could be room to build out the points more if they sort of consolidated these titles a bit.
Exactly. And we talked about that in our group too. It's like we said with the AT&T position, it's the same school. It's kind of the same position. So you really don't have to keep repeating it over and over again. You can just say you were a 2nd through 4th grade writing teacher, and these are the things you did. And you can list it out like that instead of wasting the space here and here, saying it again and again. Good points. One more person, and then I'll open it up to just general questions. Anybody? Okay, well then I will open it up to questions. Just throw your questions out there to me in the time that we have left. See something.
So we are at the 2-minute mark. So I just want to give some closing information and basically how they can, how they can get in touch with you and stuff afterwards if they do have more questions.
Yep, and I will put it here too, so you can scan the QR code. That'll take you directly to our website. You can also text me or call me directly, and you can visit our website here, and then I'll let Iram take over, and I appreciate everyone's time. Thank you all.
Thank you. This was really great. So again, thank you everyone so much for joining and participating. We love all the active engagement during with the questions and stuff. So great job there. We do encourage you to schedule your complimentary career strategy session for additional assistance. Like I said earlier, you'll receive an email from me with more information. You'll get the link to complete a short survey. Please take the time to do that. It just takes a few minutes, and we actually do share the feedback with the coaches, and we take into consideration your feedback to help improve the program even more. So once again, thank you guys for joining, and have a great day.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.